Yeah, is everything okay? And audio and stuff, is that fine for you? Can
Yeah,
you
that
like hear
works
me
for
fine?
me. Yeah.
Cool. Great. Yeah, yeah.
Welcome to Mostly Training, Tom George. How are you, mate?
Yeah, good. Thanks, Sam.
Yeah,
Thanks
and
for
I will let everyone know that this is 7 a.m. on a Sunday for you, which is no small thing, and it is appreciated. But are you a morning person?
Yes, I think so. I think I sort of jump around a little bit. I think I'm sort of neither a night guy like I'm sort of a bit of both in terms of obviously with training, it's always a morning thing. So I was always like, you get up at 6 and off you go. And then I think as I've had a bit of time off, still get up at like 6:30, 6:45 most mornings, but it's not quite like I'm not like a 5 a.m. up and
Yeah,
at it.
yeah, there has to
And
be
then
a reason.
yeah, exactly. I kind of feel like I'll get up at 5 a.m. if there's like a reason to. And with training, it was like I was happy to be up at 10 to 6, 6 o'clock, whatever it was. But I feel like, yeah, at the moment, I just had hand surgery. So I'm sort of like not a morning person right now. I'm just like recovering in recovery phase.
What happened?
Yeah. Just like rowing over time has just worn away the like tendons and the sheath around the tendon in my middle finger. So then it was time to like we'd managed it with injections over the last couple of years,
Yeah.
and it was time to get actual surgery done and rebuild it, which is a lot bigger as a surgery than I expected it. I thought they'd just go in like cut it open, section
Yeah.
things back, but actually they like harvest a tendon out of your wrist to put into your finger and then rebuild it. And now it's like I'm allowed to like move the tip of my finger
Shit.
5 times, 2 hours, and that's like it. So
Oh,
it's
wow.
quite interesting. But yeah, so I think at the moment, am I a morning person? I'm probably getting up like 7,
Yeah.
and just like so. I guess in some people's books maybe, but it's yeah. I like to normally and before I was um, doing yeah, I'd be like I get up at 6, 6:30, and then it's like go train. That's like
Yeah.
first
Yeah.
thing,
Yeah.
and like slightly get it done at points, but also it's nice to like in that time, I feel like you're not giving away the day to it. Like I hate the idea of getting to like 2 o'clock in the afternoon and being like, I haven't done this yet, but I've got like, other stuff is coming up that I need to do, so I need to
Yeah.
like run, go and work out, and then either you feel like everything's getting late and compressed. I quite like the idea of being like, that's my time. You do it,
Yeah.
you enjoy it, and then
What
you
was it
can
being
like
a full-time athlete? And that's kind of, I felt like there were two schools of this in rowing. There were that
sure,
school of thought, which is, let's get it done. Let's make sure we get it done, but let's get it done so it's almost out of the way. And then there was others of us, and I put myself in this latter camp, which was, but this is what we're doing.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
definitely,
And yeah, because that justified where we were, which is in Canberra. The only reason you're there is to row in the national team. And so
yeah,
like my whole reason for being here
is for
is to
this.
do this too properly. And it's not that I don't respect this idea of doing other things. It just and
Mm,
over time I sort of come to respect in the interest of making it sustainable. Part of it
yeah,
is how people partition the
yeah,
work and get through it day to
yeah.
day, week to week over a decade.
Yeah, I think I probably agree with that on when you're like in the throes of it. Like I'd be like, okay, the first session because you're doing 3 sessions a day, it probably has to be reasonably early to be able to like build in recovery time between sessions as well.
Yeah.
And I think the third session, especially if it's like a land session, I'm like let people kind of do that when they want. Like okay, at points it's good to like all erg together or all
Sure.
like lift together, but you can allow a bit of flexibility to the athlete to be like some guys might have something that they need to get done that afternoon,
Yeah.
whether that's like getting the car fixed or their missus is like, can you come? I like want to spend some time with you, or like there's a massive spectrum on that,
Yeah.
and there are different things for different people that like pull at them, and so then some guys will be like, okay, 2 o'clock rolls around, I'm starting that third session so I can leave, but then some guys will be like, cool, I'll do that at 4:30,
Yeah.
and that's quite and I think that I kind of agree with you. I think that's where I find rowing programs. I'll be like, no, you go like this time, and this time. When actually just like allowing a bit of freedom there can sometimes like free athletes up. You make a happier
Yeah.
athlete sometimes.
Or
Like
maybe a
people,
phasic approach, when you're in Europe,
exactly,
everyone's a bit more dialed in
yeah,
for your
exactly,
racing season. Or
yeah,
um,
exactly.
I thought Princeton did a pretty good job of that sort
definitely.
of thing where as the academic portion of the year escalated exams and deadlines and that sort of thing, they give people a little bit more wiggle room with the expectation that the work will still get done.
Yeah. It was always a problem though, I guess. Not a problem, but I always feel like, yeah, the first semester that was great. In the summer, I always was like, that's right, as you get into the racing season, and it's like the squeeze point academically, and you're like, oh, people start being like, I need a bit more leeway, and you start being like, well, sure, but also we need to like start nailing this here.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, I think Greg, especially when I was there, would like managed that pretty well. But it's like now with the like hindsight, I'm like, wow, that's an unenviable task, isn't it? Of managing 30 athletes or whatever it was to
All that,
40
all that's
athletes.
a lot of fun because it's like
Yeah, yeah,
even an eight as a when it goes well, it goes really
yeah,
well. A squad, when
yeah.
that goes well, that's the best. And when
Oh,
it
that's really
doesn't,
fun. Yeah,
yeah, it's
yeah,
a high risk, high. Imagine with a big
yeah,
American football program when that goes
yeah,
well,
yeah, absolutely.
right?
Yeah, I
So
think
you got
that
to roll the dice.
the managing individuals bit must be like awesome and so much fun. And you're like working out what works for X doesn't necessarily work for Y. And I feel like for me, that's something that I wish I had experienced more. And I think Greg did it pretty well at Princeton. I know Rob at Cambridge does it very well.
Yeah.
But
How would you
yeah,
experience it more? I mean,
uh,
you've gone to
yeah,
reputable
okay.
programs at all
Mm,
stages, and just so it's probably a good time as editor to give some context
yeah,
to the listener for you.
yeah,
You're a British athlete from England,
yeah, yeah. From England, yeah,
and you went to high school at Radley,
yeah,
which I have some overlap with, which is a famed rugby and rowing school. Is that
yeah,
right? And
yeah, yeah, yeah,
then a touch point for us is we both went to Princeton. You
yeah,
went on to Cambridge. Your international rowing overlapped with all of this because you went to World Juniors, I believe,
yeah,
several under 23 teams, and
yeah,
then two Olympic teams and two Olympic medals, one in the men's eight in Tokyo, a bronze medal, and
yeah,
then have some very narrow silver
yeah,
medal in
yeah.
Paris, and we'll talk about that.
We'll
And
get into
then
that.
just some individual stats. You're one of, I think, 10 people or thereabouts to go under
Yeah.
540 for 2K. Is that right?
Yeah, well, it was when I guess when I did it, I think I was the ninth to do it. So then, and someone else did it just after me, and I'm not sure if anyone sort of added to the group since then. But yeah, 10 or 11, I think.
It's a
Yeah,
short list, and
yeah,
in my estimation, you're probably the lightest guy under
yeah.
540.
I think so. Yeah, I think so.
And
Um,
as far as concept two is concerned, you still have the 5K record, although it seems as though Ollie Zeidler went a fraction faster.
yeah, yeah. He knocked point one off, which is yeah. I mean, fair play. Like you
Yeah,
know,
yeah, for sure. That's the way I lost a world record by point one as well,
yeah,
over a
yeah,
thousand. So that's the name
yeah.
of the game. They're there to be
Yeah, you want to
broken.
see it happen, don't you? So yeah,
Yeah, yeah. And I saw on the British rowing website that it said that you originally got into rowing in order to get fit for rugby. Is that
yeah.
accurate-ish? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I like reluctantly probably picked up, or I think I wanted to when I first started, but I think I reluctantly carried on at points where I had got into it by yeah, I just really loved playing rugby, like wanted to be good at rugby,
Yeah.
and I was like, cool. I think I see rowing as a tool to staying fit. And then, but I guess now I look back at that and I'm like, well, you row for 2 terms, but you only do rugby for one. So you're going to spend considerably more time rowing anyway. So you need,
Hmm.
like, I guess it's going to lend itself to you getting better at rowing in that time, especially when you're that age and like picking up the skills just come with practice and time committed
Well,
and building
at
physiology.
your
Like,
school at the time at Radley, was the rowing and rugby at a similar level?
yeah, I think the rugby was pretty good. In my last year, we had a really good team. Got really really lucky because we had a couple of guys who now are like playing for England and playing professional rugby.
Oh,
So I was very fortunate that those guys probably carried us a bit.
okay.
But it meant that they both played in the front row, so it meant we were just like demolishing people at the scrum, and it was like you were always on the front foot, and that obviously is quite a nice luxury
The
to
best
have
way
at
to
school.
play.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
it's a lot of fun.
And then obviously the rowing was interesting. I was there in like a pretty sort of good era, where a load of us went over to the States. Myself and then Ollie, who I rode the pair with, was at Radley with me, and then Charlie Elwes, who was in the eight in Tokyo and in
Yeah.
Paris, also was at Radley with me. So, and then there were a few other guys who did under 23 stuff and yeah, went to like US colleges. So we had a good era of guys who wanted to get better. And I think, at least in the UK, the big thing is Henley. Like
Yeah.
that so much. People train. I just feel I remember people were like, we want to try and win Henley. Cool. And it was like, right, let's just start moving trees to do that.
So Win
And
Henley and Win Rugby, those were the
yeah, yeah, those
things.
were like the big thing. I think because of Henley and the like prestige that comes with it, it meant that we trained harder for rowing than we did for rugby
Yeah.
on that basis. It was like, cool, well, I want to win Henley. Sure, I'll do an extra erg this day, or I'll go get up early and we'll go erg at this time, or we'll get down to the river and go rowing. I think that it sort of supercharged it a little bit. And I remember when I first came into the boat, I was 16, and the guys who were like 18 were like, no, 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 this is how we're going to do it. And they wanted it so much, and they like just drove the standard massively. And they were in their last year of school, and that I think you just sort of picked it up, and you're like, cool, this is what we do. Fine,
So it
let's
was
do it.
as you enter, you go in, what was it, we call it year sevens, that sort of,
Yeah, like
um,
14.
yeah, well, um, no, like so seventh grade would be when you
Yeah,
start at a senior school in Australia. So
okay.
12-ish years old. Is that when you started?
A couple of years later,
Yeah.
yeah, so I was 14. Yeah,
Yeah. And then when
when
you
you
got to the school, was that, hey, this is kind of the done, like this is what's cool here is winning at Henley and playing rugby, or is that something that
go.
you played rugby before you got there?
I played rugby before I'd sort of even considered that, and I probably had a couple of years of rowing before I'd considered that. The rowing was not considered to be cool.
Right.
We formed our own island really, and
Yeah.
we all just got on that island and um, like loved it. But like we swam against the current quite a lot with the school as well with the
Right.
rowing stuff.
Yeah.
People would be like, "You can't just spend your whole life rowing, and you can't. You're never going to like go to a good university if all you do is row." And like obviously a lot of irony in that
Yeah,
now.
yeah, I
And
got a bit of that
back and
too.
you're like, right, so of the like eight of us, so six went to Ivy League schools and have done pretty well.
And
And then
it
like
was only like rowing was the only way that people were going to get there.
yeah,
Yeah.
basically at that point. Like yeah, I think I just sort of think back to that. I'm like, wow. Again, like you come back to management of individuals, you're like, wow, you did that terribly, didn't you? So
Yeah.
that's always
Yeah.
funny. Yeah.
Um, and were any of the other rowers decent at rugby? Like, did you have crossover, or were you kind of
Yeah.
one of the fewer guys that were
Some were, some sort of weren't interested or
Ollie?
didn't do it. Ollie was really good. Ollie was like, he was captain rugby his last
Okay,
year.
okay, so yeah,
Like,
yeah,
I look back like, of the guys, I was never gonna, I can see it now. I was never gonna be a good rugby player. Whilst Ollie's one of those guys probably came through school and had to make a decision as to whether he wanted to row or play rugby at university. And like, did he want to go to Yale and row, or did he want to stay in the UK and play rugby? Whilst like that was not an op I mean, I obviously could have decided that, but
yeah,
that
yeah.
was a foolish decision on my side. Like I was never going to be
When was
competitive in
that looking? When was that obvious to you?
probably when I was 16, after that first year in the first eight, and we lost at Henley just, and then we like went. I went on a rugby tour, had a great time. We went to Australia, had an epic time. Came back and was like, okay, this is really like I'm having a really fun time, but I'm like just about first, it's like second 15, first 15, like on the cusp of,
Yeah,
and then um, I kind of was like, right, but like I'm definitely a first aid guy. So I was like
yeah,
starting to be like
yeah,
trying really hard and putting everything I've got into playing rugby. And I'm sort of like, just about, and I did play in the first 15 that year, but
yeah,
I like probably, at least to start with, probably the last man in
yeah,
or close to. And it was like, okay, I was fortunate enough to like make it my own spot. But and like I got a couple of guys were like maybe injured that helped me to get in at least. And then when they came
Yeah,
back, I was like, no, like, remove me from this
sure.
place. But with the rowing, it was like, cool, I'm like in that first eight and I'm like a hitter in that first eight.
Yeah,
And then obviously then the next year, so I played rugby that season, had a really fun, like really, really enjoyed it, but then like went back into rowing and then like, did the junior national team stuff, met the coaches from Princeton, Harvard,
yeah,
Yale. And I remember being like, okay, so last year I was like, I'm committing as much as I can to rugby. And uh, yeah, I'm just not like I'm good. I'm okay. You know, whilst like I'm when I'm in the rowing, I'm committing as hard as I can to it, but because that's just like the nature of I guess how I went about things. But I was also like, and I'm still on this trajectory. I'm still going upwards, and like I've spoken to Princeton and Harvard and Yale and Washington or whoever, and they wanted like me to go there and row for 4 years, and I was like, well, I was like, no one's coming to me being like, hey mate, you're
yeah,
really good at rugby.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So you start
yeah,
to see that, you start to like see that and experience that, and you realize
mm,
that uh yeah, I guess I had that moment where I was like, okay, so realistically, I'm going to row at university. Like if I want to carry on doing sports, it's going to be rowing, which I do want to carry on doing sports. So then from that point, it was like, okay, I guess we're like following this path. And then yeah, played rugby my last year at school still whilst rowing. And I remember just like I got into Princeton, what is it like December time, and I remember being like, okay, wow, I'm starting to like have those moments where you're like, okay, please don't like someone smash me up here. And I'm like,
yeah,
you know,
yeah,
yeah, I was or like broken leg. That would be like a bit of a spanner to my plans. Um, but yeah, that sort of like crept in a little bit. But at that point, I'd already like committed. I was like, cool, I'll play rugby as
okay,
hard as I can, and then it's over. That's it. And yeah, I mean, I loved it, but it
yeah.
wasn't. Yeah, I was never gonna. I wouldn't be sitting here now, like having gone for
No, yeah, that's so we've got a lot in common actually, more than I knew. Mostly because we raced Radley in the final of the PE. I don't know if you know that in '01.
oh in '01. Okay, I didn't know it was
Yeah,
Radley race. Okay,
yeah, yeah. In the
yeah,
final,
yeah,
length and three quarters. But that would have been good for
nice.
them to get the final that year. And
Yeah, yeah,
at the time, we were good in rowing historically, but hadn't been for a while. And we
mm,
had at the same point in time, our rugby program was maybe in 2000 was probably the best
yeah.
schoolboy rugby team in the world.
Okay,
And
wow.
I played a few games, was on the fringe of that. And it was this sort of ebb and flow each season where the standard of rugby was really high. And then
Yeah,
until my last year of school, we hadn't won a single race in rowing. And
okay.
not in
Yeah, yeah,
three
yeah.
seasons of rowing, I hadn't won a race.
Yeah. And then no one wants to turn up the next year because you're shit. It's like we're going badly, and then you're
I
like,
didn't want to turn up the next year
yeah,
because I thought
exactly.
I could just go throw the shot put, lift weights, and then
Yeah,
play rugby, and then that'll be fine.
yeah,
And my mum
yeah,
actually convinced me, maybe you keep rowing until Christmas. We won a couple of races and then had a undefeated domestic season and ended up at Henley,
yeah,
which then gave a few of us a few opportunities, including we
yeah,
had 4 or 5 guys that did national team stuff, two
sure.
guys that went to the
Yeah.
Olympics. My friend Matt Ryan, who we rode together in London, was in that
Oh, yeah. Okay.
crew,
Yeah.
and a bloke named Nick Hudson that was in the men's quad that got silver in '09. So at the
Sure.
time,
Yeah.
no one was thinking anyone's going to do anything here.
Exactly. Yeah.
Then in retrospect, we actually had a pretty good amount of talent. But if I understand correctly, we also both went 604 at school.
Yeah. There you go. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Um,
Yeah.
but I'd imagine your powder weight was better then as well. At school, what did you weigh or thereabouts?
I was probably, I guess, like low to mid 80s, 80
Yeah.
kilos. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Maybe.
at
Yeah.
your and how tall?
Yeah. 6'4".
Right. So you're
Yeah.
kind of prototypical rowing
Yeah.
build, and you had a 604 at school. So this is why you're getting attention from American
Yeah.
colleges. and he'd done
Mm.
the junior national team around
Yeah.
that time. So was it becoming, did you see a way forward, not only to keep rowing by going to Princeton or a US college, but hey, maybe I could do this at the Olympics? When did that start to register
Yeah,
as a,
interesting question. I think I to start with, honestly, part of going to the States and going to Princeton was obviously to row in a good program and be part of that, but also and to have, but also to like, have that experience, the educational
yeah,
opportunities. I think I remember so back when I went, it was like British rowing. Their policy was we will not support this. If you go, you won't race for GB.
yeah,
And that's what David Tanner, the performance director, would say to every year at the meet like a meeting of the team or junior teams. He'd always sit them down and be like, I know that all the US college coaches are here, and like, all the parents would be there. He's like, we do not support this. We will not like you will not row for Great Britain. And I remember my parents being like, so what do you think of that? And I was like, well, honestly, a lot of people do the junior team and never resurface in rowing, you know?
yeah, yeah,
And so right now, I don't actually know if I'm good or if I'm just good because, other people haven't figured it out yet, or like my physiology is ahead of people's for some reason and they'll catch up to me or like whatever. Or I might just be like amazing physiologically and just not good at rowing. There are those guys who are like they have absolute engines, but they just can't figure it out. And so I remember being like, I think we should still like, explore the US option for that reason. And kind of, if I end up being good enough, then like eventually they'll have to relent. So many
yeah,
kids had started going, and at the end of the day, their business is winning medals at the Olympic Games, and so they're going to allow people to come in and help do that. They're never
yeah,
going to sit there and no, no, hang on. Like 5 years later, you went to the US, and interestingly, it actually changed about probably a year really into me being there. That first summer that I did under 23s, we were just a group of, we were in an eight and it was just a group of guys from the States. And we'd come back after the IRAs and Shep, the development coach, then the head of the like pathway was basically like, so we're trying something a bit different. You guys are all going to do the eight together because you all race eights in the States. You all love it. And like everyone else has been doing the trial system. They'll compete for like the four and the pair, and you guys will just do this, and let's see how it goes. And we didn't go very well that year, but I think having that faith put in us
yeah,
meant that then we all were like, oh, well, we'll come back next year, and then we'll come back the year after, and we'll keep pushing to try and do this. And slowly, like more guys went to the States, so we integrated more. And then
yeah,
he was like, well, now I'll go race it. And now, like I think that the latest thing was that they have basically the States is now the pathway. And so they've like taken away because funding's getting squeezed and things like that. They've gone, oh, actually, we'll so we think you should go to the States for 4 years. It's free for us. They didn't say this part, but I imagine that the internal conversations like it doesn't cost us any money. They come back in the summer. Like, yeah, we'll probably have an element of like a churn rate where some people just go, I'm quite good at rowing, but I'm quite enjoying living in the States, or I want to get a job, and that's fine.
but
Yeah.
aren't there enough good undergrads at Oxford, Cambridge, and Brooks that
Mm.
are offered on the different path, or
Yeah, there are, and there's a big like cohort there, and I think yes, but just a lot of your talent pool from it's like, I think those guys who like maybe aren't going to Oxford and Cambridge, but maybe don't want to go to Brooks,
yeah,
who
yeah,
are in that middle ground, and there's a lot of talented rowers in there, and especially out of obviously, I guess the private school system in the UK is really strong. Is the where the strong rowing is, but
yeah,
then for those guys, it's getting harder and harder getting into Oxford and Cambridge, and that's been like maybe held against them more and more and more. And so
okay,
I think it's quite interesting to see, yeah, more kids go to the Harvards and Yales and Princetons, and it's quite fun. I remember sitting on the IRA final in my senior year, and someone told us that there was like two Americans or three Americans in the whole field.
mm.
Wow. Okay, it's basically like a fantasy league for under 23s at that point. You sit there when you're a
Yeah.
junior, sort of draft kids in, and you're like this guy, and yeah,
I was the only international in the 1V in our senior year.
Really?
And
Yeah.
that was abnormal because we'd always had a few.
Yeah.
But that year, uh, the same standard, we had national team guys
Yeah.
in the eight. They just happened to be American guys at
Yeah.
the time, and
Yeah. Yeah.
they
Exactly.
hadn't they hadn't got guys like you from the British team, or they hadn't got New Zealanders, they hadn't
Yeah.
got Australians really. It was
Yeah.
mostly some Canadians and then odd
Yeah.
European guys, you get the occasional
Sure.
Serbian or whoever, but it wasn't a system like it is now. You'd
Yeah.
mentioned that originally they put you in the under 23 eight with the understanding you guys raced the eight. I
Yeah.
mean, was that the bow class that made sense to you at the time? Was it if someone said, hey, you could pick your boat, would that be it?
Yeah. When I was that age, probably, I think it was fast and furious, and we all did it in the States. Like, we spent at Princeton, we spent a bit of time in fours and pairs.
Yeah.
But I know that like that was a bit of an anomaly. I remember doing stuff in pairs, especially, and people being like, "Oh yeah, I haven't rode a pair since." And to start with, I think there wasn't very much of it. And I think they do a lot more now as it's becoming a more international thing. You're not just banging everyone out in mixed eights all the time. But I think when I first like got to Princeton, I remember we would like it was like Monday was eights, Tuesday was fours, Wednesday was eights, Thursday was
Hmm.
eights, and then the morning on a Friday would be pairs, and then the afternoon would be the eight. And so you just sort of always had a little bit of like exposure to it. But I just think that that at that point in time, racing the eight was a lot of fun, and um, I guess like we came back and we were like pretty cocksure of ourselves, and we were probably quite annoying, and everyone looked at us. We were not a quiet group. We would be like, yeah,
Yeah.
we've been hollering around the lake, and I think, um, yeah, I look back at that and I'm like, wow, we're probably like in the right boat for us at that point in
I think
time,
that's
and
what you need in the eight,
yeah, exactly, yeah,
or it helps. I don't think you don't need to be that way, but
yeah,
eights that are that way tend to
yeah,
go
yeah,
pretty
yeah,
well.
yeah, exactly, exactly,
When compared to what was just the volume at school in terms of training volume during the rowing season at its
yeah.
peak, like compared to
Cool.
what was normal at Princeton?
Um, Honestly, it was like reasonably similar in terms
Yeah.
of number of sessions. They'd probably be longer average, but we'd sort of row every day, and then except for a Wednesday, and then also do. I mean, it was kind of mental. We'd do ergs at 9 o'clock in the evening,
Yeah.
because
At
it was like
school,
that. Yeah, at school, that was like
just to get
after
it
the like,
in.
yeah, after
Yeah.
you'd done your like homework, and then it was like 9 o'clock meet there, and you do sort of an hour on the erg.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, I think back to that, I'm like, wow, we sort of trudge home at 10 o'clock, like banging some food and be like, right now I've got to try and go to sleep.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So
Yeah.
that
Yeah. Yeah. So
probably would
you're
have tweaked that a
604 at school, you'd actually you obviously had talent, but you'd been trained up pretty well at that stage as well. Like you'd put in
yeah.
some pretty
Yeah.
consequential work. I mean, even if you're doing an hour in the erg at that age, that's
Yeah.
serious.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So,
Okay. And
or
then,
like, yeah, whatever it was. Yeah.
so you felt like you could just slot into Princeton pretty seamlessly in terms of the
Yeah.
talent and the volume. And how did you
Yeah. I think,
find the rest of it, the social side of things?
yeah, pretty good. I think the big difference on the rowing front was just that like everything was, foot to the floor. I just remember getting on the
Hmm.
boat one of the first days, and you're like, right, we're just going to go to 20, and then we're going to go to 22, and then and you're just like, and you're just ripping it, and people are like yelling at you, and I was like,
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But
It is
the
like
first
that.
day, yeah, exactly. And the first day of Princeton, the 30-minute erg first, and then a quick row like the first formal day. And I remember, I can't remember where I finished, but I think I was in sort of the top five on the erg. And yeah, Nick Mead was level with me. He might beat me. I think I might have beaten him just. Um, and I remember being like, okay, I'm in the like right area for like
Yeah.
what I wanted here.
Yeah.
Um, so then, yeah, just that first session, I just remember being like, oh, okay, it's not like the UK. It's like, okay, now we're doing UT2, and it's like you just get to paddle. It's like make sure you're running well. You don't want to be going too slow, but like you don't have to go too fast.
Yeah.
And then it's
Yeah.
suddenly, like next thing you know, it's like, okay, off we go. Just send it all the time. And like I remember just like a senior just yelling across at me, and I was like, yeah, welcome to the big leagues. I'm probably not like fully like I just wasn't expecting this, but it's good fun.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. I'm sure you got on with it pretty quickly, Phil, and
yeah,
then
exactly.
felt
Yeah,
pretty comfortable in that and probably prepared for that pretty
yeah,
well.
yeah,
I mean, no one knows at that stage, but you're probably prepared as well as anyone
yeah,
to make a go of it at Princeton. And the way I would describe it when I came back, people asked about the on water. I thought rowing in the US, they'd turn it into more of a blood sport, at
yeah,
least in the eight. And I like that. That made sense to me. I
yeah,
grew up playing rugby too, so there was always just a lot of contact, and it seemed like those two
exactly.
things had
Yeah,
a lot of overlap. They were combative. Whereas
mm,
as you get, I think, more elite and the smaller boat classes, it's more finesse and it's
yeah,
longer and therefore more, it's more about efficiency and
yeah,
precision,
yeah, exactly that,
which is a
exactly.
slightly different shift over time. So this seems like you must have had this evolution, but you definitely started with a toll
Yeah,
on it.
yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, you are sort of socially how you fit in. I think just I remember just the team being so welcoming, and you just go, everyone's like, cool,
Yeah.
come on in, crack on. Like on the water, I'm gonna try and kill you, and then off the water, we're gonna like hang out, we'll go to meals together, like come to the clubs if you want to, and like have dinner there with us, or like we'll all. And I just remember being like super well integrated, yeah, pretty like cool and welcoming place.
You
It's
mentioned Nick Mead, and
yeah,
he's 6'8", for those of
yeah,
listeners, the Olympic gold medalist, Nick Mead now, and 6'8". I had my teammate Steve Coppola, Olympic bronze medal in the US men's eight in Beijing, and he was a classmate and roommate of mine, and he is closer to 6'9" than he is 6'8". And
yeah,
if I'd seen one person that was 6'8" plus, it had been
yeah,
one at a time. And then at Princeton, between some freak recruits, some guys in the program, some basketball and volleyball dudes that are just walking around.
yeah,
I hadn't seen that much tall timber in my life.
yeah, yeah.
That you had that experience at all?
Yeah, I think I remember that also not necessarily like seeing football players walking around and like linemen and
Yeah,
being like, you're big, just
big,
big dudes. They're like
big
six
boys.
four, like maybe not 6'8", but they're like 6'4", but they're like 250, 300 pounds,
Yeah.
and they're just like, and they can move, and you're like, right, okay, this is just like I haven't seen people your build, That's
Yeah,
quite funny.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. At that age, especially when it's a
yeah, exactly.
19-year-old guy who's 275 pounds and
Yeah,
lean. And,
yeah,
and then I realized it sort of seems some freaks too, but I think it's contextualized because I didn't have any access to American football players or
mm,
volleyball growing up, but
exactly. Yeah.
there's some high
Those guys
level
are.
rugby
Yeah.
players, and you were at a high level then too. Did you feel like you were of the same standard, or did you feel like, okay, I can work to the top of this pile?
Yeah, it was probably like I've got to work to the top of it, and I'm not there yet. And yeah, like I probably turned up when I was this like skinny little guy, and I probably needed to put on a bit of weight, and yeah, that would help a bit, which I guess it did. Well, I guess I just sort of naturally bulked out a bit. I've never been like a massively thick guy, but definitely. And I always look at like photos now from Princeton. I'm like, wow, the diet over there and just that access to food at all the time, and you're able to just like kind of be on top of it if you want to be. You're never like, okay, I'm going hungry today or whatever. So
Yeah, there's
yeah,
always food around.
yeah,
And if you can get a
exactly.
cheeseburger from breakfast onwards,
Yeah, yeah.
there's no
And
excuse.
sort of 2 o'clock in the morning, and then you
Yeah,
can,
yeah. Anytime you want. If you're awake, there's food available.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
Were
So
you conscious, for my frame and for this sport, adding some good body weight's going to help?
yeah, I think yes, but I probably I just ate everything, which I think was fine then because I was still sort of growing and developing. I look back now though, and I'm like, wow, I don't think that's how I would go about it if I was trying to do it now. If I was trying to like, add muscle mass or whatever, I'd be a lot more like calculated and yeah, I was sort of conscious of it, and I think that's so a big thing that like I guess changed in the last like few years. I started to be a lot more on top of like that side of things that maybe I'd just taken for granted on the basis of being like, well, calories in is useful at this point because I'm just training all the time. And there's an element that is still true, but
That is most of it, unless there's
yeah,
some sort of inflammation. But when you're young
exactly,
and you're in really good shape, you can deal with a lot, and you clearly were. And there's a long precedent of the Matthew Pinsons of the world that,
yeah,
hey, we just got to, especially in the British program, we just got to fuel it. And then the message when, at least when I was at Princeton, is they talk about how, the word from Mike Cady, it was basically the word from God was, it could be hot dogs.
it doesn't matter. Yeah,
It
exactly.
doesn't matter. And as you get on and you're looking for room for improvement, and also you're dealing with accumulated niggles, this stuff
Yeah,
that you didn't have to at the time, so you have to be a bit more conscientious.
yeah, exactly that. I think that's probably the big piece. As you get older, your body wears differently,
Yeah.
and so you have to then be yeah.
Mind
So
you,
I'm just
I
gonna plug.
lost weight the whole time I was at Princeton. I did the opposite.
Yeah, really. Okay.
I went from 235 to about 200 pounds.
Oh wow. Damn.
And
And did
and
you then
mostly,
hold it in the summers?
what
Were
was
you
that?
like when you what did you then hold it when you went home, or would you like come
Oh,
back
I
in being like,
chipped away out of no, the whole time. I looked around and saw that there was
yeah,
a couple of guys on the US national team that were my height. And they
yeah.
weren't, when I got there as a freshman, I was heavier than all the guys in the US team and
Oh wow.
heavier than
Okay.
all the guys in the Princeton team. And I was like, well, I'm not
Yeah,
faster, not yet. And I'm
yeah,
shorter than everyone.
yeah,
So until then, I just come from a position of bigger is
yeah,
stronger, is more powerful, is better.
yeah,
And that was that. And then the evolution was, well, there is a power to weight and a ability to move and an efficiency component.
yeah,
And because the US guys were there at the time, training out of the boathouse, and I was
yeah,
looking at their body types and thinking, okay, if that's something I want to do, then let's think about
yeah,
what's realistic. And so bit by bit,
yeah.
just sort of carved away at it. Did you know that when you were looking at doing stuff and you've been doing under 23 stuff with the
Yeah.
British team over the summer, and you're
Yeah.
weighing up, okay, do I go and live as a professional person and figure out what that is, or do I go and row? When were you, I mean, was that from freshman year that seemed like a possibility, or did that come later?
Yeah. I'm just actually really quickly going to plug my laptop in because it's
Oh
going
yeah,
to
no,
like
do what you need to, mate.
I've left that and then I can answer.
Hamish's headphones died. Cam had to go
Nice.
and tell his kid to stop coughing or leave the room, or both.
Yeah,
You've
exactly.
had to plug your charger in. We keep it pretty organic.
Sorry about that. There we go. That's now
All right,
charging.
mate.
Oh, good. Yeah. So yeah, I think going back to your question, I think in the summers I always had that thing where I was like, first year I'll do under 23s, get my feet in the door. And then I was like, cool, do I want to go and get a job, follow the corporate world? And I don't know how it was for you when you were at Princeton, but like when I was there, the guys on the team, especially, like that was quite a big thing that people wanted to do. Like some guys wanted to do under 23s, but not everyone did it every year. They'd like maybe dip in, do it one year, then the next year get a job, and then like maybe decide. And I remember being like, I would like to do that, but then every time I thought about doing it, I'd be like, well, have a lot of fun doing the under 23 stuff, get better at rowing doing that. And I probably decided around 2015, 16 maybe. I was like, well, probably gonna have a go at this and
Yeah.
see. Like out of college, it's probably gonna be like go home. I'm improving well on the erg. I think I guess running through numbers. Freshman year, I went 57. And I remember being like, all I wanted to do was break 6 minutes. I'd done
Yeah.
6:04, but I'd like put on a lot. Like I got a bit bigger. Princeton erg program through that winter was really good. And I remember I just sat at 130 the whole way, and then just like with 300 meters to go, it was like cool. I'm now going to go to a 123.
Was that the
Um,
fastest in your class?
yeah, that was the fastest in my class that
Yeah.
year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who was second?
And Nick went, I want to say 601, but
Yeah.
maybe 50, I think. Yeah. And then my sophomore year, I went 49.9. And that was like
Good
quite
chunk of
a jump.
time.
Yeah. And it was a like big one of those ones where you go, like, I think that freshman year, it's like you're shackled by being like, just break six, don't fuck it up,
Yeah.
And then,
Yeah.
and it's like that was like a big barrier then at least. And then sophomore year was like, again, like another year of training. Erg program was really good. Kicked on really well. Was getting stronger, getting fitter. And then junior year, I think I went 46. And
Still
then
good. Still like a decent chunk from.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And then senior year, I must have gone 44. I think I went 44,
Yeah.
3, or something like that. And I
So
remember
that's
being like, okay, so
serious.
every year at Princeton, I could see I was like moving on, I was moving forward. And I was
Is
like, well,
that the
hang on.
Princeton record, and was it at the time?
I think it is still, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I guess I don't know. I'd have to ask Greg because I don't think they necessarily like formalize those like that much.
Yeah.
Um, like I don't remember there ever being like a list anywhere that was like,
No,
okay,
no, it wasn't a list, but there should be. I
mm,
remember Flickinger brothers, Jason and
yeah,
Mark were 48,
yeah,
47
yeah,
in there, but 44 is fast in any program. If there
yeah,
were
exactly.
guys faster than you anywhere in the US in college, that
Yeah,
it would there would have been a
one or two of
name,
them.
or yeah, that's an elite company. So you know that if you can convert it to whatever the British team requires of you,
Yeah,
and you've been in the
yeah,
system, so it's all looking pretty
yeah,
realistic for you.
yeah. And I was like, okay, I'm moving on really well on the physical side of things. I think I'm like moving boats pretty well. Uh,
Did you
so I
find
think
the Princeton training program must have worked well for your physiology?
yeah, really well, and especially that erg program in the winter. I thought
Yeah.
it was just like you came in, and it was just like I was also there. I also there at a time with some really strong guys.
Yeah.
So Nick, um, Pat Ebel,
The Masters.
yeah, yeah. Masters was there.
Yeah.
We had like a strong group of guys who were like pushing on all the time.
Yeah.
Jamie
I
Howe,
mean, these are all
going quick.
national team guys, Olympians, Olympic medalists for those that
Yeah,
aren't aware. So, and you're not aware at the time. These are just the guys you
yeah.
row with, but then that's the standard of the
Exactly that.
athletes at the
Like
place.
you have
Yeah.
no idea. Like you're sitting there and all these guys, you'll be sitting there. Like we used to always get together at World Champs and like get coffee. And it was always fun. There would be sort of 6 or 7 of us there. And like Fred Visterveld was there, like Danish bronze
Yeah.
medalist at
Yeah.
Tokyo.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and we just like had a great group of guys who would push on a lot. So I remember always be like I never felt like comfortable in being like at the front. So then it was like you've always got to keep pushing because you know that like Nick is coming for you, or and I think I'd regularly not win like pieces through weeks,
Yeah.
but then on the test days I'd always then be there.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and I think the score I think I went. I actually don't think I've got a photo of it anymore because I think I lost it. It was someone will I'm sure was I think I did like an 18:12 6K.
Yeah.
And I remember like Greg being like, okay, that's quite fast. That's
Yeah. Yeah.
okay. Yeah, and yeah, that was like the one where I think I was like, okay, cool. I'm like very much in the ballpark.
Do you do a range of pieces over the winter, and some of those are going to be more
Yeah,
favorable
yeah,
than others, and they all leave clues. And
exactly. Yeah,
I mean, I remember the best guy in terms of numbers in our program at the time was a guy named Alex Hearn,
mm,
the 550, 549 guy, senior year,
yeah,
rode in the USA in '07.
yeah,
Um, and he could bang out the 3x6K with 5 minutes rest, all
yeah,
under 19. And at the
yeah.
time, I couldn't do
That's
a
Yeah,
a 6K under 19, probably could
exactly.
never do a 6K under 19. And he was quicker on the 2K, but not by as much. And I reckon over 1500, I could touch him up. But most of the work is going to be
Yeah,
guys like yourself that 2K is more favorable to guys that can have a fast 5K. And the
yeah,
talent that you clearly have had is something that you possessed at the time. And it seems like the
yeah,
type of work that was done at Princeton was complementary to your physiology, and that the
definitely.
people there were at a high enough standard that it
Yeah,
really fired up that competitive spirit, brought it to life, and you get a lot of opportunities to compete there.
yeah, exactly. And I think that's the biggest thing. And I guess that's like the underlying piece, isn't it? Is like you get to compete, and that's like I think some guys love it and some guys don't.
Yeah.
And it's like you get to turn up and you compete every day, and training is competing with yourself because you never want to stand still. If you stand still, you're going backwards. Like it's sort of an old adage, but it's very true. Or like what is it? They're like no man stands in the same river twice because he's not the same
Yeah.
man. It's the same river,
Same
right?
river,
And it's
yeah.
like exactly, and that's like exactly it, right? You're always pushing to be better. And I like talk about this. People always ask me this, and I'm like, the thing I loved was I loved to compete, right? And you compete with yourself when you're training because you want to get better, and that's just that can be paddling around, but ultimately that's what you're trying to do is get better.
Yeah.
And there is an element of competition to that, and then you compete with the guys on your team at trials and selection, erg tests, seat racing, and that gives you the right to compete with the world, right, or other colleges or whoever it is. And I think the opportunities to have that and being comfortable with that is really important. And I think that's yeah, some people have like that, and
Yeah.
some people
They
don't.
like it
That's a
or
big
they, yeah.
yeah, exactly, and that's like a
Yeah.
big intangible. You roll in and you're like, oh, I've got two 6Ks or three 6Ks or two 4Ks or whatever it is, and it's gonna like absolutely suck. But some guys you roll in, you're like, okay, cool, like roll up your sleeves. Um, and I always remember I'd never be the fastest on the first 6K or the first 4K. And then if it was the 3 by, on the second one, I'd probably like be, maybe third, second. And then it was like the last one, I'd be like, cool, all right, we're stepping into it now. Like this is the one, that's like really, really matters. And yeah, I think that's the key piece is whether you can't teach that to people really.
Yeah.
You just got like some people throughout it like love it and some people don't. And I always look back at it now and I'm like, yeah, I think that almost carries into life. Like people always say, oh yeah, like rowers, like they're really successful people beyond
Mm.
rowing. But it's like, well, yeah, because they just compete, you know, and not in like a malicious way or anything, but it's like they're there and they know that it's like a task at hand. It's quite workmanlike at points, but they're going to roll in and they're just going to compete.
It doesn't matter
And
how. Also, a lot of people, they go into an office and
exactly,
I don't feel good, so maybe I should just take it easy today. And if you're a
exactly,
rower, how you feel doesn't really bear any relationship on what you need to
exactly.
do
It's
that day,
just like,
especially
sure,
if you're in an A. Just
yeah,
get to work.
yeah, exactly. It's like get this done, and then we can, yeah, assess the next piece when the time comes. But at the moment, the first most important thing is like the next thing, and
Yeah.
what right now. Yeah,
I asked Hamish Bond the same thing, and I could guess the answer, but I'd like to hear it from you. You feel like rowing is the sport that presented itself based on the school that you went to, that ostensibly was a tool to get fit for some other sport. Turned out you're quite good for it. But it also seems like been a very useful vehicle to compete. So how much is it rowing is good because it's a great competitive outlet, or
yeah.
something that the sport innately has been enjoyable to you and is enjoyable?
Um, Probably a bit of both, but I think yeah, the interesting thing is like the school bit and like how you're brought into it. I think, um, yeah, when I look at school at Radley, I'd say that the competing part was less important, at least from the school. But I think within our little group of guys, we were like, no, no, that's really important. And then I think you got to Princeton, and it was like, no, this is really important. Like buy in, let's go, and that everyone are taking shots at each other from different ages. And then I think you just you enjoy that. I think it sort of combines the two. And then, there's an element, I think for me that, fast boats are fun. Going fast in the erg is fun, but it's hard.
Yeah.
And, people call it like type two fun or whatever you want to call it. And maybe there's an element of that. But, when a boat is going well, and you'll know what this is like, it's like, okay, the sessions end, you go back in Princeton, you go back up the hill, you go study or whatever, but you're like, cool, can't wait to get down there tomorrow and
Yeah.
go again. Or here it's like, yeah, when you're in the national team, it's like you go home, you rest, you eat, you watch TV, whatever, but you're like, cool, I'm ready for I'm excited for tomorrow to like get in the water, get on the water and like, keep that building that momentum and keep pushing it forward. Yeah.
How much is
I
it
think that,
that you get to put all that together and know
yeah,
that there's going to be a day where it's going to be you and your mates or your mate and against another crew, and you get to
yeah,
find out who's faster on the day. And
yeah,
that could be anything, but it happens to be a rowing race versus
yeah.
I really love the sport of rowing and I'm good at it.
Um, yeah, I guess it's probably, I get, yeah, I don't know. I think it's probably the former of like,
Yeah.
it's that I get to like win and it's a rowing race. It just like happens to be a rowing race. Like if I was
Yeah.
a talented runner, then
Yeah.
I'd be like, cool, let's go do it on the track.
Yeah.
And I'd have the same approach. Um, yeah. And I just think that like with that, there's been an element of like enjoyment that's come with the rowing. But I think you're
Yeah.
right. I would sit there and be like, it just happens to be a rowing race, really. I don't think that it's like, necessarily like that was my like preordained thing, like you said, sort of fell into rowing by accident, then started going well, then kept pushing. Was like, oh, I'm learning a lot about myself, I'm learning a lot about other
You're not,
people,
I
I'm
mean,
learning a
you're
lot.
not from a rowing family.
No, my dad didn't row, but
Yeah.
both my brothers did row
Oh,
like
okay. So
through.
there's some precedent.
Yeah, we like well, one's younger, one's older. My older brother was a lightweight at Yale, so it was like
Okay.
reasonably good. My brother
Okay.
went to GW DC.
Oh, cool.
Um, yeah, so we all went to the States, like all like bits like that. I think it was probably the competition piece, but I think with both of them as well, it was never like when we were at home, we'd erg and stuff, but we'd always go running together. But it was always
Yeah.
like cool. There was this like gate 2 miles from home, and it would always be like, yeah, you race to the gate
That's
first
probably a
before you.
fairer race between
Yeah,
siblings. And also
yeah,
if your older brother's a lightweight, he's like,
yeah,
just gonna have
exactly.
you kick
Yeah,
his ass every piece
yeah,
forever.
exactly. Yeah, but it
Yeah.
was always like the modality was kind of irrelevant,
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think I learned that a lot as well in the lockdown. I spent a lot of time riding my bike, and I really enjoyed it. But also, it was just like trying to get good at something else, knowing that it was contributing positively to rowing, but being like, cool, I quite enjoy 5 hours in the saddle, so
Well,
I'm just
on
going to go
that,
do
did
that.
you ever think once you realized you had some special physiology, did it ever pique your curiosity or where else could I point this? Or did you think I'm probably in the right sport for me? You're in one of the best programs in the world, so with the
Yeah.
best support, um, or was it both?
I guess a bit of both. I think the cycling thing was always interesting because, um, well, obviously it's now changed because you could do the like cyclocross stuff for the America's Cup, which
Yeah.
is like lends itself quite well to rowers, right? You got to be
Yes.
bigger and with weight behind you, and it's just like produce watts.
Yeah.
And then, but at the time, it's like being good at cycling would be really cool. But I'm obviously like a tall, like gangly guy compared to being like a professional cyclist.
Yes.
So you're like, right, you're probably not able to like channel it into that. Um, then there's I guess I really want to do an Ironman at some point and just see. And like I don't necessarily think like I'd love to commit enough to it that it would be like a good day out. I wouldn't want to do
Yeah.
it just to try and finish.
Yes.
Um, and the same with like running a marathon, for example. I'd love to be able to like do one well and just see where I can like basically push my body
I
to.
saw you'd been doing some running
Been running quite a lot
since Paris.
recently. Yeah, since Paris, just like I really like it. And I
Yeah.
find it like freedom and it's fun and like going out and going fast is quite cool and just like clipping along is quite nice. And obviously running's great. I've been traveling a bit since Paris, spent a bit of time out in the States, like visiting friends and you can just run anywhere. So that makes it quite a lot
Yeah, it's
easier than
portable.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Than like packaging up bikes to go places or figuring out renting bikes when you get there. I think, yeah, so I don't know. I remember uh I spent a bit of time in Australia, and a couple of mates were like, "You need to sign up to be a Category B rookie for the AFL." And I remember being like,
Yeah.
"Okay, I don't know what this is," but basically that's like talent identification on the basis of physiology, right? And being like, "You're the right body type, you can kick a ball, and you have an engine." And I remember we still joke about it to this day. Those two guys, they'll be like, "I can't believe we didn't actually like force you to do that." And like I always think like that's an interesting sport where actually just like, okay, you bit of physicality to it, obviously, but like just having an engine, that's like what it's 2 hours. It's like the ultimate athlete sport, I think, that because it's like you got to be robust and physical. You got to be able to go for 2 hours, and you got to have hand-eye coordination on both our hands and feet.
Yeah. They definitely have some big skilled guys, and there were within the Australian national team, there's a cohort of guys from New South Wales and Queensland that grew up playing rugby, and then the
Yeah,
Victorian, some of the WA guys grew up playing AFL Aussie rules. And
yeah,
so
yeah,
so someone like James Tompkins, awesome foursome fame, he was a pretty
yeah,
handy AFL player.
yeah,
And so was Cameron Mackenzie McHarg, Olympic silver
yeah,
medalist from the Beijing Four, owner of
yeah,
776. He was basically on the cusp of playing for playing in the AFL at the top
yeah,
level, and then went and rode instead. So I'd
yeah.
imagine if you could kick and pass at all, you probably would have been pretty handy.
Yeah, well that I sort of never really learned how to do it, but like obviously through rugby, I'd been able to like throw I can throw a ball around, I can kick a ball around.
Yeah.
So then I remember just like talking to them and them being like, no, 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 we're going to do this, like we're and pushing it, and it was like we went and ran. What's the like trail
The
called in
tan.
Melbourne? Yeah, yeah, ran the town. It was
Yeah.
like clock some time to start seeing what we're doing. Because, and I remember one day we were there, and I think it was Essendon, and at the time they were having a horrible time, Essendon, but they were in there running it, and I was
Yeah.
like, oh, damn, I thought we were just turning up as like punters, but I'm like, the professional teams also are running
Oh
this
yeah, yeah.
trail
Everyone runs it. Yeah.
as like a measurement, and I thought that was just quite fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Every and they still do it.
yeah,
Yeah, like
exactly.
I've done the same thing. It's still
Yeah,
very much a thing. Uh,
exactly.
just to take it back to the pandemic,
Yeah,
that was when you did your sub 542K.
yeah.
You had obviously some influence of your own preparation. Was the 2K something that you lined up yourself, or was this something that they'd wanted you to do?
Yeah. It was in the programmed in. It was like
Yeah.
Jurgen was like, we can't just do no pieces, no tests. So we need to do um, some 2Ks and some bits. And like, we did. So that was the only 2K. And actually, we did a 2K the day before and we treated it like a heat sort of thing.
Mm.
So it was like, I remember banging it to like 1100 or 1200 at 120. I think I was at a 25.0 average through 1200 and being like, cool, I feel really good. Like tomorrow, I think I'll do it.
What did
And
you
then going, I think
finish
I
it?
then like, I think I finished at like 48 or 47
Yeah.
and being like, wow, I'm in unbelievably good shape right now. Like it's on for me. Like, that was like the last piece of the puzzle of confirmation of being like, actually, it's very much there. So yeah, I'm going to program that in. We did some other like crazy shit that summer. We did 3K tests, which are like the worst thing ever. But obviously a great indicator because I think I went 127.0 or 127.1 for
Yeah.
3K.
I mean, it all
And I was
scales,
yeah,
the 1500 would be relevant, less relevant at 1K. So
exactly.
I think
Yeah,
anything from 1500 to 10K is really relevant for a 2K.
exactly. And like so I had been in that summer I'd been sort of close I think the years before, so 18 and 19. Well, 18 I still at Princeton, so that was the 44. Then 19 I think I went 42, maybe like a 41.8 or something. But I remember being like, cool, I'm stepping on still. And I was like,
Yeah.
coming into the 2020 season, it's like this is the year you got to start like making a tilt for this kind of thing. And I think
Is
I
that just
did
because
one.
you'd kept progressing and then therefore that was the next?
Yeah, and I was just in the mix. And again, it's just like the guys who are around you. Like obviously we had Mo there,
No.
and Mo's at that point was 40.0. And we had like this guy Josh Bug, who was also like competitive on it. And he was the guy, I remember watching him, and he did it in like a really different way where he would like basically go out as hard as he could and hang on. And he kept like blowing to like a 41-1 or something, but it was like actually you're getting closer and closer down the line of being like, I'm on for this. And I remember
Yeah.
Mo saying when he went like 41-1, and I think that in early 2020 and or 41-5 or something, and Mo had gone like 40.4 and I'd gone like 40.9 or 41-0, and we'd both beaten him. But Mo said to me, he was like, he's closer than us to doing it
Hmm.
because we're like approaching this. I think is and I remember like reflecting on that and being like, that's quite interesting. But also, I remember sitting there and being like, okay, well, I've gone 40.9 or whatever. Like, come on, it's like the next step's that. So then obviously lockdown happens and it's all a bit weird. But I remember being like, right, okay, so training program's going to get sent out every week or every 2 weeks in blocks, and we don't know how long this is going to be. But Jurgen said, but we'll have to do some tests at some point. Once the Olympics got delayed as well, it was like we can't just like drift through the year. We need to
But it
do some
was
like
pretty
time.
prescriptive in terms of this is
Yeah, we
what you're
had a
doing this
program
week. Yeah.
out. This is what we're doing today. But then there was that flexibility. So especially like UT2, you could mix modalities. So, 20 every time there was I think I did one 20K UT2 on the erg in the whole time, because every time that was on the program, I was like, I'm just going to go ride 120Ks on the bike.
Yeah.
And
And is that because
it'll
that
be
was more palatable? You felt like it was more useful?
both, I think. To start with, I was like, I kind of want to ride my bike. I think that's really fun. And at the end of the day, like the Olympics being delayed,
And it was the
and
summer.
yeah, and it was the summer, yeah,
Yeah.
and it's like good, and there's no one on the roads because it was locked down. Um, so, and I was out. My parents live in the Cotswolds, so I was out. It's like hilly, good terrain, great place to be. Um, and so I'd just go out and ride, and basically always try and like average above 30Ks an hour, regardless of like elevation gain or whatever. So I'd always be like, okay, you clock it, you're like pushing it a bit. There are some quite steep hills, some quite big hills, which was quite fun. But yeah, so that was like every time it was long, steady, it'd be like actually go out on the bike, and then you drift through. Obviously, you're going to drift through heart rate zones because you're not going to
Yeah.
get on a hill and be like, oh, hang on, actually, like I can't because my heart rate is too high. I was like, no, let's just get up and over and
That's
like
not how
crack on to the next.
rowers.
Exactly.
Have you ridden with pro cyclists before?
No, no.
It's funny because you just start riding away from them up the hill because they're just spinning. And I think
Yeah,
it's because we're heavier, you just want to get over it.
yeah,
And we're so used
exactly.
to, as it gets harder, you kind of just start pushing. So everyone starts
Yeah,
pushing the
yeah, yeah.
tempo. And I've always tried to think, well, why do we do that? And I reckon it's just to get it over with. And because
Just go.
it does feel
Yeah,
good as well.
yeah, exactly, and like
Yeah.
get over. I the Ineos guys who have done a bit with they obviously like the America's Cup guys did a bit of overlap with
Yeah.
the cycling. They were saying that like on the flats they can sit in the peloton, it's pretty fine, and then the minute it hits the hills though, like either that happens or if the cyclists get told to go like up the
Yeah.
hill, it's like
Yeah.
you'll see it, and
Oh,
it's
they
just like
can go for sure. I think it's that
yeah, and then like shimmy up there, and then they're like, cool,
yeah,
thanks guy, and then you're like, stuck in wind trying to catch up. Yeah,
yeah. And
so
it's not their cross training, so that's not their
mm,
work.
yeah,
I
exactly.
mean, yeah, I thought it was interesting, and there's obviously big body weight discrepancies, and I'm not sure most people appreciate how small world tour
Yeah,
riders are for the most part. Like even the big guys, they're
yeah,
80 kilos.
mm, yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah. So you
they're
spend a
like
lot of time on the bike and
yeah,
some
a lot of time on the
pretty
bike, and
specific
then
stuff on the erg.
yeah. So then it would be like Monday was always long steady, and then like a weight circuit. So I'd always do the long steady, and I'd go like quite a lot longer, and then
Do you have weights at
come
home?
in. Yeah, I had like some weights, but honestly, like for me, I kind of bought into the idea of just building the physiology rather than weight. So I just like did like I guess I'd normally just do stuff with it honestly like a 25 kilo plate,
Yeah.
and I was like, that's all I need right now. I'm
Yeah.
trying to like it's about, like efficiency of my like body rather than being like I've got a load of weight on me
Yeah.
and like I'm and so I just do, and sort of became a joke. Like it'd be like, oh yeah, how's the weights program going? I'd be like, yeah, cool. I'm just like squatting, holding a 25 kilo plate, and I'm doing like jump squats with a 25 kilo plate, or like bent over rows with a 25 kilo plate. And it was
Do
like,
you think
I'm
you
just
obviously you were strong at the time, but
yeah,
because people will try and, that doesn't transfer into how strong were you at the time. Presumably
Yeah.
you could have lifted more than that. You didn't need to. That's not the same as
Oh
not being
yeah,
able
yeah, for
to.
sure. For sure. Like if I'd had like the full, like I'd wanted to, I could have done it. But I guess like I don't dislike lifting weights, but I don't necessarily see it as like fully functional into rowing all the
Yeah.
time. I think that you lift a lot of weights. I think you then are in danger of like having muscle that's ineffective on your body. And I think that like the first thing should be like you basically the erg will lean you out really well into like, and so will rowing itself. So then like the weights, in my opinion, is like maintenance to improve strength in your like core. You need
Yeah.
really like a good like core work, and you then it's like slightly injury prevention and
Yeah.
slightly
So you can tolerate the rest of the training.
exactly. But it's like I don't necessarily subscribe to the like you need to have a really heavy eight rep max or 1 rep max on like a squat or bench or anything. I'm sort of more into the like if you can move a 20 kilo bar 220 times, that's going to be better for your rowing. It's a bent over row, say, than or squatting. That's going to be better than doing like 150 kilos for 8 reps or whatever it
Did you
is, you
ever
know.
do that? I imagine when you were at Radley, you did lifting weights
Yeah,
for
for
rugby.
instance, obviously like the can weights and stuff, it was always like circuit based, and it was all yeah.
But what
Um,
about at school?
no, at school there was
No
no
weights.
weights at
So you
all.
started
Yeah,
lifting at Princeton.
pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like the first year at Princeton was still like the sort of the classic can weights and
Yeah.
doing
Yeah.
that, and then we like build it in, and I think that there's definitely a place for it, and I think we lift a lot as a team on our like altitude camps in Sierra Nevada, and I think there's like a place for it, but yeah, I just personally felt that like I'm not going to get weaker because I'm doing so much on the erg and on the water that requires those muscles. So it's about like efficiency of moving my body weight rather than adding to that body weight and then also trying to figure out the efficiency part.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes
Um,
sense.
yeah.
I
So then,
interrupted you saying you did steady long ride on Monday, then weights, which was
yeah. And
pretty
then,
light, structural.
which was basically pretty light and a lot of
Yeah.
like core work and things
Yeah.
like that. And then Tuesday was always like UT1 stuff. So it'd be like an 18 or a 20K with like two 4Ks, UT1s. That was always erg. And then, yeah, a weight circuit. And then
What will
Wednesday
you
was
sit
always
on
two.
for those sessions? Or what sort of split?
Uh, I was a 47.9 every time.
Okay.
Yeah, without fail, like rain or shine. Like I
Yeah.
was like, I'm just going to do 47.9, and um,
That's a
like
weird number.
yeah, well, it was just like just tap it under 148. So I just basically
Yeah, I know. But then I'd start going 147.5 seems rounder,
yeah. So I
you
think
know.
yeah, like basically like I got told I was going too slow on the UT2, and to be honest, I didn't necessarily believe that. I actually thought that I was polarizing it really nicely.
Yeah.
So I was like, quite into the idea of being like, look, on Monday, and Jurgen was like completely fine with it. It was sort of, yeah, other people, they'd be like, oh, but you're only going 148 on the UT2. Like this guy's going 146. And they'd be like, cool, I see him on the 2K kind of thing a little
Really
bit, you
not
know?
helpful to hear that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, and so it'd always be like, I wanted to like polarize it quite a lot, and it'd be like, yeah. So that was always my UT2, and it had basically the whole career, like it stayed with that, never pushed it on
So you're keeping a
that
limit
much.
on
Yeah,
not going faster to keep it at the appropriate intensity because then there'll be a time to go fast and that's not there.
and it's also like that idea of like you don't want to like move your UT to here unless you can also shift that onto there, right?
Yeah.
The top end on. So it's
Yeah.
like you have to scale that. Yeah. So and then the UT1 speeds would be probably like 140s, something like that, 140s to 142s.
Yeah.
Maybe like at T3, I'd go 139.9 and
Yeah.
then like 140 to 21 sort of thing. Yeah. And then yeah, and then so Wednesday would then be like 12K or 16K plus, and then a 30-minute erg at rate 20.
Hmm. That's a
Uh,
solid day.
yeah, which was pretty much always like not always for score, but it was like you go 9K minimum.
Yeah.
That was things. Like, go 9K. If you don't feel good, or like, or like sometimes all you need to do is go 39.9, and then it's like sometimes though I want you to like hammer it on and like see what's there.
And they'd
Yeah,
they'd
and
give you
then
that prescription.
yeah, Jurgen was always like
That was all
30
directly from
minimum
Jurgen.
standard. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it was like 39.9 is minimum standard, but like if you go 39.9, like, I'm not sitting there being like Tom or like Mo, you need to be going 38.9. It's like, no, if you go 39.9, that's cool. And
Would he
then,
send out an email saying with the pro or built into the program this week for the 30-minute, let's give it a proper crack?
yeah, that he'd like put like a sort of rough percentage of PB he'd want. So it'd be like
Okay.
approximately 97% or 96%, and then
Yeah.
approximately, yeah, 99. And then it would be like in red, it'd be like, kind of want to see what you guys can do this week. Yeah. Um,
Pretty cool that
and
you got
then,
to go through his program.
yeah, yeah, it was cool. Yeah. I mean, you go through it and you're like, I guess at the time, probably take it for granted. And then you're like, wow, actually, I got to like be part of that. It's pretty special.
I could tell on the other
Um,
going against that, you feel the
um,
inverse of the confidence that like you knew the guys, I knew the guys who were racing.
yeah,
They could feel confident that the program that they were doing worked
yeah,
because they had all this evidence
yeah,
that it did. So everyone's like, well, fuck yeah, I'll do this because if we do this and we do it with full buy-in, there's a really high chance that we'll
yeah,
be successful. And we didn't
yeah,
have that. So
yeah,
you don't quite have the same atmosphere and it doesn't make a difference to what you're going to do on the start line, but you're aware of
yeah.
what your opposition, what their strengths and weaknesses are.
Yeah, and I think the way in which some of his boats went and won just strengthens that, right? Like, I think back to like, yeah, like Cam's race in Beijing, Mackenzie Buccal, who we talked about earlier, like his race in Beijing, where it was like those British
Yeah.
guys like dug that nowhere, and I think that it just like builds the aura slightly. You're like, oh shit, like they'll always be there.
Yeah.
Um, always, yeah, which is yeah, and so like being a part of that's pretty special. And yeah, like I really enjoyed working with Jurgen. I think I was like really lucky to be able to. And even over the last 4 years when he was over with France, it's been like always catch up with him in at races and in like around the world, and he'd always be there, and he'd always be watching, and he'd always like, it's like, this is what I'm seeing. I think we need to like think about this or that, and it's always like nice and like relevant to you. And he'd never like step on people's toes. He'd just always be like, Tom, like you just sit a bit taller, or like you need
Yeah.
to, and you just know that he still was like vested and invested in it, and
Yeah.
I think that was really nice to have. Yeah,
And you also know you don't have to put it through a filter of is this good advice, because it's coming
yeah,
from him. It's just like
yeah, exactly,
just
exactly.
onboard it, just do it. It'll be
Yeah, exactly.
helpful.
Yeah.
So we were at Thursday.
Yeah, Thursday, we're getting long steady, so like probably back out on the bike and and if it was raining, I had a watt bike, so I'd just probably sit on there and grind out like 100 minutes, 102 hours or whatever. But otherwise, it'd be like trying to get on the road, and I was trying to do on those sessions, it'd be like yeah, 100Ks sort of minimum,
Yeah.
100 to 130 kind of thing, and then that was quite a nice way
What would your
to
average heart rate be for that sort of ride?
arrive.
Yeah.
But like probably averaging in the end around like 135
Yeah.
to 140.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was like obviously you have points where you're down at 120 as you're like long descents or whatever, but then you'd also be at like 175 to 190 when you're going up steep hills and
Yeah. That
trying to
that sounds about right. And you
yeah.
must have been all right at training by yourself.
Yeah, I was sort of fine with it. Obviously, I think that was part of the reason I think I started out with being like I want to get on the road on the bike was you can kind of watch the world go by, sort of suffer by yourself, but you can cycle somewhere, have a coffee. Once like cafes and things are reopened, you could go like get a coffee somewhere. The weather that summer was just unbelievable in the UK, and yeah, sort of like serendipitous.
Yeah.
We were able to,
Yeah.
blue skies every day, not too windy, so it was kind of perfect for it. And I just like really believed that like I was getting better by doing that, and I think that probably showed right in the 2K, and then um, yeah, I went sub 40 again in December that year, and I went like 39.2, and I think I always look at that and I'm like, fuck, I should have gone 38 in the 38s on that one. That was like, it was probably there for me, but it was one of those ones where you're like, don't over rev it too early and then be worried, you know. And I
Yeah.
actually probably should have just the wind a little bit and been like, if I end up going 540, then it's fine.
So if
But
that was your fastest year on the machine,
if for 2K, yeah.
yeah, and then you you went to the Cambridge program where you're able to produce your fastest
That's
five.
like after Tokyo. Yeah. So
Yeah,
I did
after Tokyo.
yeah, and then back
Yeah.
in the formal yeah, went over to Cambridge, yeah.
Yeah. And that's so it was in the Cambridge program that you did the 5K,
Yeah.
which is the world record at the
Yeah.
time and
Yeah.
there or thereabouts the current world record and slightly slower. And
Yeah.
off the back of that, even though you were training at an elite level, do you think it was the change of boat class that what combination of factors do you think you kept training, but it seems like at least on the erg for 2K, you didn't get faster after that
Yeah.
point.
Yeah, so I always think like so I didn't actually ever do a 2K at Cambridge. I did one for the team in December and I went 42 like pretty well. And
Mm.
I always think I probably should have done a 2K around like after that 5K, a couple of weeks after the boat race or something. Um, but just didn't fit with like doing the boat race and the timing of it. And then it was like we did the boat race. We had 2 weeks and then it was trials. And then it was like, right, you're in the pair for the first World Cup. So it was like go, go, go on the water. Like we didn't really stop and be like, should we rip a 2K and just see?
Yeah, yeah,
I think was the right call at that point. But yeah, I think quite a lot changed. I think going to Cambridge got on really well with Rob, and I guess this will come back full circle right now to the like managing individuals that we sort of started with before we went into sort of like background and stuff. And it's like got on really well with the coach Rob at Cambridge. I think he just is a phenomenal coach and a phenomenal man manager, and he understands individuals really well, and he knows what's right. He's very good at knowing what's right for individuals. He's good at pushing guys when he needs to, but also like very good at the like putting the arm around the shoulder and being like, look, I know that like you're struggling with this or that. Like, is everything okay? Like behind the scenes, gets to know people properly. Um, gets like he knows my wife well, for example,
mm-hmm.
and that's just something that's happened on the basis of the fact that like he coached us and he'd always come and make sure like say hi and
Yeah,
you know he understands that there's more to like my life than just rowing.
yeah,
I think I really, really thrived under that when I was at Cambridge, and it was like we trained hard at Cambridge, and I think when we came back into the like national team, I think there was like they all thought we'd just like dicked about basically when we were there, um,
why
but
would people
actually like
think that when my understanding is that the preparation for a boat race is pretty solid by virtue of the fact that it's two crews, so it's kind of this everything's great or everything's fucked, and that
yeah,
raises the stakes. And the duration of the race means that the
you're training
preparation
long.
has to be proportionate. So why would they
Yeah,
think that when it's been going for what 170-ish
yeah. I
years?
think 200 years is 2029. Yeah, it's 200
Okay,
years.
coming up on 200. Yeah.
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 So yeah, yeah. I think an element of it is that it's a different program. And I think like what the world of rowing is like. I think people want to be quite like,
Yeah. Insular.
I'm doing the national team or whatever. And I think there's also the element of um, your students. So you can't possibly be doing as much as we are because your students. So and at Cambridge it was 2 sessions a day every day. Like there was never really a third session in there.
Yeah.
And I think that was probably quite a thing when I realised that actually that third session, it probably like reinforced my thing about what I was saying about like lifting weights or whatever. It's like I was doing my ergs and we were out on the water, and then I was in classes all day or whatever. But I felt that I didn't feel like I needed more. I
Yeah.
felt like I was thriving in that. My body was thriving. Like I was getting quicker, and also like I was massively stimulated away from rowing. And I just think that that helped me so much. Which just like sometimes it's really good to get away from rowing, right? And sometimes it's really good to, I'd go to classes and I'd sit there and I had mates who were on my course who weren't athletes, and then you'd go like catch up with them, or you'd go to the pub and have a pint and just be able to talk about stuff that isn't rowing.
Yeah.
And you'd be running. Like I remember the days were just, I think back now and I'm like, wow, it's incredible you do that. You get up in the morning, be on like the 5:40 train to Ely, row, uh, either row twice there, like stay there, and then come back at like lunchtime, and then go to classes all afternoon. And then, there might be a lecture at the Cambridge Union, and you'd be like, I want to go to that. So you'd like charge over to that, go to that, and then you'd go get dinner, and then someone would be like, do you want to hang out and do that? And you just were always on. And I think it's really easy to be like, you should be on the sofa recovering. And there's a place and a time and a place for that. But I think you've also got to remember that people have other things going on in their life that they want to be able to give some time to. And, like the old sort of saying of like a happy athlete is a fast athlete is very true. I think like going and doing like hanging out with some friends, and it doesn't always have to be like beers, it could just be like getting a coffee, catching up with an old friend or whatever, will sometimes give you that stimulation. So then when you just like feel good about something, and then you're like, okay, cool, I feel really, really good. And that recovery side of things will then like take that'll carry forward. You don't necessarily need to be like recovered in terms of like physically recovered. You can like have a mental refresh as well.
Yeah.
I think I was able to have quite a lot at Cambridge that allowed me like a bit of freedom, and then that includes the way that Rob ran it once we were in the pair, where like we'd sit down on a Monday and go through the program for the next 2 weeks, and he'd be like, you know what, on this day, on Wednesday, we need to do some pieces, and I think we need to do something hard. And then he'd be like, what are you thinking, guys? Like, and he'd guide us through it. To be honest with you, I'm sure that he'd already had a thought to what kind of session, what the session would be. But the way that he would bring us in to like that discussion just meant that I think we just felt really invested in the whole project and being like, wow, we're an equal sort of partner in this. It was never like, this is what you're doing, go do it, don't ask questions. It was like, ask questions, let's discuss this. Like, what do we think? And, that meant that we got to do like, we heard that Hamish and Eric they did like repeater 500s at pace, and they did like 25 or 30 or something. So we were like, we'd love to just see like how our bodies hold up under that duress. So we went and did we did 25 of them, and with 90 seconds rest, at pace on the water. And I remember being like, that's the hardest session I've ever done, hands down. I remember, and I remember
At what
I
sort of
posted
pace?
it. Well, there's a bit of stream in Cambridge on the river, so but anywhere from like 32s, 30s, like, and towards the end we tried to like ramp it up a bit. But yeah, like probably like 131s, 132s, up to like 135s into the stream. But it was like
right on it.
like
Yeah.
and like getting on it, and just like doing things like that where I think we like left and I remember being completely fucked, and like we came off the water and Rob was like, so the second session will not be happening today, like there is no need for that second session, because it was like that was like a 2.5 hour session. Like we like got off and I remember just like all my muscles like cramping, and I was like, oh my god, we've absolutely pushed it. But being able to do things like that and just have that little bit of autonomy, I think it brings you really into like the program and into it. And I think it was just, I think looking back, I'm like, in hindsight, that was just a really clever way to keep people involved, is to like, even if you have it in your head as to what the program will be. And there were times where we'd be like, what about trying this? And he'd be like, I think like we don't necessarily, why don't we just like, what about this? And you'd be like, oh yeah, cool. And you just basically do what the program was that he would want you to do. But
I think that answers my curiosity as to how you ended up in the pair. And it seemed like there was a lot of upside, because I'm looking at, the 8, which is the boat class that you were in, and that's looking pretty good for the Paris Olympiad. And I imagine you could fit in that mix, which, in terms of pure medal ambitions, is got to be something you're considering. But obviously, the weight of having more ownership over the process, doing it with a mate, that seemed like something you wanted to do.
100%. I think we wanted to challenge ourselves a lot as well, and like Ollie swapped sides at Cambridge, so We'd both been stroke siders in the Tokyo 8, and then he swapped sides so we could do the pair
Wow.
for the sort of initially for the boat race for the blue boat, but also for trials because it was like,
Yeah.
well, you're both here, this will work. And then we didn't really know where we'd like pitch in at all until after the final trials, where it was like, right, you're going to go race the pair in Belgrade, and I want to see what it can do. Was
So
what the
you
head
just
coach
went to
said to us.
trials and kind of like, we'll see where they put
Yeah,
us and then go from
we've
there.
done some of the earlier trials, and it was the point when I was like, okay, right, we're actually going quite well in the pair. Was obviously Ollie had swapped sides, I think in December or November, maybe late November, and then the point that it was like, okay, we might be going okay was that we turned up to there's a 5K trial on the water in Boston in Lincolnshire, like up north on a canal, and Ollie, there's a good story actually in this
Hmm.
is that Ollie, yeah, 3 months on or 2.5 months on bow side, and we've done a bit in the pair, but obviously to start with when he swapped sides, it was like you start out in the 8 and you're just going to sit in the middle of the 8 and get the pattern. It's nice and stable for you, and then it's like cool. Now we're trying to 4, and then eventually it was like cool. Let's go out in the pair and like see how it goes. So we probably first went in the pair in January, and then yeah, we got to um, this trial in sort of mid-February on it was a 5K, and well, yeah, we won that trial by like 12 seconds, I think, over everyone. And I think we sat there going into it, we were like sort of shitting it. We were like, well, sometimes it feels really, really good. And
Hmm.
sometimes we're just like, we like lose ourselves a little bit. And like Ollie was like, I'm just really worried that I like basically overthink it because I've like, swapped sides and everything. And it was like, I think we just got to trust ourselves. Rob was like, you got to trust yourselves. You know when it's good. It was really windy in the second half. So I think it was one of those ones where it was like, you're not gonna really feel it amazingly anyway. So don't worry too much about it. And we like the first half, I just remember like paddling along, we were going, and it was like that's it. That's exactly like those points where we've had it, and we just had that until this like little bend in the um in the course, and then it was like right, you're just in this like headwind, like underwater sort of thing. So yeah, and I think that was the point we left that. And we were like, okay, right. So we're actually like very much in the mix right now,
Yeah.
and that's really important, and that's like a good place to be.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and uh, yeah, I just remember like we were pushing off the dock, and like one of the like other guys from the Tokyo team was like standing on the dock, and we like pushed off and like were paddling off like arms only, and they just like yelled at Ollie, and they were like, "Come on, then let's see this bow side" or something like that.
Yeah.
And I just remember like being like, "Oh fucking hell, you've like thrown this out there," but I know how Ollie is, so I was like, he'll just now. I was like, in a weird way, I know he's just going to be like on now because it's like, right, fuck you, I'll be there. Like I'll see you at the finish, and you're like, cool. So
Yeah.
but it's always like the way that worked and the way that we'd like gone away and then came back in. I think, yeah. And then like after that, we just really enjoyed racing in the pair, and then yeah, went to the Belgrade World Cup and like won that. And I think that was the one where you're like, okay, wow, we're actually reasonably competitive. And we were away for that year, so it made sense for us to be in the pair that year. And we had like that bit of freedom and control. Obviously, like we that was sort of taken away from us a little bit when we came back into the team, and we weren't allowed to work with Rob anymore, and that sort of changed things a little bit, like in the like mentally. And I think again, sort of coming back to the individuals piece, like no one really communicated with us like why we couldn't work with Rob, and why, given that he had been sort of the architect for it, and why like certain things were the way they were. Like I think, I mean, I'm not like trying to like throw a load of stones, but I think we were sort of held at arm's length quite hard in
Yeah.
that first year. But my first conversation at all with the like head coach when I came back was in January in Sierra Nevada, when I like broke the half hour the British Rowing half hour record, like on the altitude camp, and I was
Is
like,
that open or a
okay,
20?
at 20, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and then I think I did like a 38.8 or something like that average. Um, but I just remember like feeling just like a little bit distanced from like compared like a sort of compare and contrast the year before, where it was like I felt really involved in everything. It felt like I'd been back training since September, but like the head coach hadn't come to talk to me until January, and I just was like, I don't know. For me, I like on that like managing individuals piece, I'd be like, you should want people to go do the boat race and things like that because it's an incredible opportunity for them, and the like educational opportunity part of it, the experience opportunity. You never want to leave rowing and be like, I never got to like experience those like bits and those things. And so
Yeah.
I think I probably would have been like, welcome back. Like we know it was a bit different in Cambridge. I just need you to like adjust back into being here. Yeah. I think I had I think I spent the first week back at Caversham on the erg because someone was injured in the eight, but or like had said they were, but then and so like I've been told that like Ollie was filling in for the eight, so like I'm basically like the spare guy, so I should just like get on there, ask any questions, and I remember, cool, so I'm back. That's really
Yeah,
fun.
yeah, yeah,
Great to be here. And it's just like again, you're just like the way things were like presented and phrased, it's just like the compare and contrast piece with like the management side of things that I'd experienced at Cambridge was quite different.
the shame when at the
Yeah,
top level when you'd expect that at all levels the talent would improve, including the management, but then whatever reason
exactly.
it seems to not be the case.
Not
Um,
always be the case. Yeah,
yeah,
exactly. And like there's like look, British Rowing, really successful, amazing team,
yeah,
and they do a lot right. And but it's like sometimes you just like scratch your head a little bit. And but the more I talk to people across other sports and across like the real world jobs, as it were, um, they all say the same thing. Ultimately, people are like, you got to assume that people are trying their best, right? And that's not always the
yeah,
case, but I think you got to assume that people are trying their best, and sometimes that's their best is just that's where it is, and that's fine. Yeah,
yeah. I was talking to my wife about this the other day. I think if I'd had my time again as an oarsman, especially mostly in eights, and I would have been more supportive of Cox's, which is not to say
yeah,
that I wasn't, but it was more, why aren't you better, as opposed to
yeah,
more being hands-on and patient with helping them to be better, as opposed to just trying as hard as possible and expecting that they should do the same, which
yeah,
is setting the example, but that's kind of the least you can do. It's not exactly
yeah,
the most you can do. And
yeah,
so
yeah,
I reflect on that sometimes.
yeah, exactly. It's like, yeah, and obviously it's like I guess it's good because you reflect on it and you like think about it and you sort of learn from it. But yeah, I guess not everyone always does that. I think it's like quite a unique skill to be able to like dissociate yourself from that now and look back and be like, okay, I want to learn from that.
Oh, I think I have to, because I make mistakes aggressively. I tend to be pretty
Yeah, yeah,
aggressive in general. So I'm like, I'm going to do this. And then
yeah.
if it works, I try and learn from, well, why did it work? And if it
Did it work?
doesn't,
Yeah,
then I'll learn from that, especially if you move aggressively or with speed, then the mistakes will be more significant and therefore more noticeable if you're paying attention. And most of anything I feel like I have to say with the people I work with as a coach, or if I'm coaching myself, it's reflecting on the things that haven't gone well as much as the things that have, and then trying to coalesce an approach for the future.
yeah, exactly. I think but yeah, I think, yeah, I wouldn't take for granted that that's quite like a unique skill, Not
Yeah.
everyone has that. A lot of people just
No.
like, China shop through, and then it's just like, no, that's like like they either double down and go, no, no, I was justified and I was right in doing that, or they go that like if they sort of like if they realize they shouldn't have done, instead of like learning from it though, they just sort of like sheepishly like back off for now, and then they like might do it again. So yeah,
Yeah. On getting better,
yeah,
you've gone from an Olympic bronze medalist to an Olympic,
yeah,
very narrow Olympic silver medalist, and
yeah,
you by the smallest of
yeah.
margins
It was almost
at
perfect. What I would say,
right. Yeah, it was
Yeah,
almost, and I'd seen somewhere that you're, and I'm not sure how much the timing is because of having to go through surgery, but you're definitely a little back from it at the moment. How much is it? Are you taking a step back from rowing to, just recently married? I'm going to go do something else, or is it I'm going to do something else for right now?
I think for right now, it's like time. Like I want to just experience some other things, and you know what it's like. It takes over your whole life, and I'm not saying that that's like a forever thing, but I think for right now, it's like the right decision, like you said, with getting married and with yeah, having the surgery. this is like a 10-week recovery. So we're like, we're getting like your hand back to full functionality. So um, it's quite a long time to not be, sort of be like massively behind the curve. So I think it's the right time to do something else for right now. I'll keep training. I want to take on, like I said earlier, some other challenges in sports and in like endurance, and see what like your body can do.
That's for you more, more immediately than post rowing, or at least you're going to have a look at that
Uh,
now. And
I think just for like right now, if I'm not rowing, like I'm never going to stop training, and I'm never going to, stop like pushing the boundaries
yeah,
for myself. So then, as a result, I think it's like, why not commit to something, one of those things for
it's
now?
usually the way
Because
it goes.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I feel like if it's like a cycling thing or a running thing, like ultimately, if I do want to go back into, if I do go back into rowing, that it's not going to put me in bad. I'm not going to be in like a bad place by doing that. It's just like, you just keep ticking along your physiology, and you keep like pushing the boundaries
It
of
might
what
be additive, but there's definitely good examples
yeah,
of in a sport of rowing of people taking some time off after and doing something
exactly.
else, formal or
Yeah.
otherwise, and coming back and being better. A lot of people aren't in a place, I think, to be able to commit to that, because you have to be able to have the
Yeah.
confidence to do something different and to
Exactly.
back yourself to be able to come back if that's what you want to do.
Definitely.
So all credit to maybe
Yeah.
the timing of it was somewhat compelled, but good on
Yeah.
you. And I look forward to seeing what you do
Yeah.
over
Yeah.
the immediate time frame, and then
Yeah.
over the next few years. And appreciate you coming on the podcast and making the
Sam, thanks
time
for
for a
having me.
conversation. And
Yeah.
I've admired your work from a distance. I knew when you were in the Princeton program because Greg Hughes had told me a little bit
Yeah. Yeah.
about you, and I saw that you were pretty handy. Hadn't heard the numbers that you were
Yeah.
producing,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
well done on what you've achieved to date,
Thanks, man.
and
I
all the
appreciate
best
it.
for whatever's ahead.
I appreciate that. Yeah. Thanks for having me, Sam. I hope, be following the pod closely as well. I look forward to seeing like where you go, who else you get on, and yeah, it's been really
Only
exciting.
time will tell.
Yeah, exactly.
I've
Yeah,
got
but you
some
started
good
pretty hot
guests lined up.
with Hamish and Cam. That was a pretty hot start. When you messaged me, I was like, oh, wow, okay, yeah. I hope my stories and my sort of insight was as good as theirs, but I'm not sure.
Well,
I
the
think
good news is it's
we
not up to us to decide, and it's what's done
exactly.
is done now. I enjoy the chat, and that's usually a good place for it to start.
Yeah, I was going to say I meant to say this earlier. I saw you posted today that like graph of Hamish's with the like power to weight stuff, and he posted that I think just before I did the 5K.
Yeah,
And I remember it because Grace Prendergast was at Cambridge with us, and I remember like when I posted about the 5K, I wrote my weight in the like caption. I was like, I weighed in at this weight
yeah,
beforehand, and
yeah.
I only did it because of Hamish posting that. And I was like, okay, that's something that I think like people seem to care about, right? It's like it's kind of fascinating. So I thought that was just like an interesting thing where I was like, I'll bang my weight in there because I weighed in at like 94.4, I think, for it.
Yeah.
So I was like, that's a good like sort of bit of context as well for people to just be like, okay, yeah,
After I posted that today, I had looked, and people when they listen to this will know when we recorded it, but I had was thinking about you in that context because I
yeah,
remembered he posted it, and I knew we were talking, and then I knew more or less what you weighed because of that
yeah,
5K, and I was thinking, okay, 5, 38, 39,
yeah,
94-ish kilos, and you're like below the
yeah,
graph. Whereas I was like, okay, where am I? I'm like, I would have been a gold medal standard in Rio and not in Tokyo by that graph. But I also think
okay,
if I were rowing by Tokyo, then I would have been. So that's my qualifier.
yeah, okay, yeah,
And
yeah, yeah,
I've got to take it because
exactly, yeah, yeah, exactly,
I've got no choice. But I did think, fucking hell, that's impressive. The power to weight thing is relevant
yeah, of
because
course,
it's
yeah,
not as relevant as it is in running or cycling.
of course,
But
yeah,
I think I could notice the difference in a heavier boat. If you take all the same guys and they're a little bit lighter with all the same power output, it's going to go faster. So
exactly, yeah,
in the end, I ended up playing that game because I thought I can't, with my frame, I'm not going to have the best 2K, but I can try and have the best power to weight. And I was going to be one of the pointy ends of the boat anyway, so I figure
Yeah.
I'll play a role here.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
But
Yeah.
very impressive stuff, and I'm sure you'll go faster if you want to, and I'll be watching on.
Yeah. Thanks, Sam.
All right,
Appreciate it.
thanks,
Yeah.
mate.